It was a difficult decision that I had to make yesterday. It's not a decision that I wanted to make. It's not a decision that I expected to make. And there was a £22 billion black hole between what the previous government had said they were going to spend and what they were actually spending. And what happened when that previous government made a commitments it could not afford, it put pensions in peril, and it sent mortgage rates and rents through the roof.
When Rachel Reeves broke down in tears during her recent interview, was it genuine emotion or a calculated political performance? The moment she was labelled our red Tory, suggesting she's abandoned Labour's working class roots, triggered visible distress. But here's what makes this truly fascinating. As she sobbed about loving Labour's traditions and history, her government was implementing policies that many traditional Labour voters feel betray those very traditions. The contradiction between her emotional attachment to the party and her actions raises serious questions about political authenticity in today's Labour. We've all seen politicians cry before. It's become almost a rite of passage in modern politics. The carefully timed tear, the quivering lip, the emotional appeal that's meant to humanise those we often view as calculating and cold. But what happened with Rachel Reeves recently was something altogether different.
There's a clear change of tone at conference. You know, the doom and gloom is sort of giving away to a bit more of the future. I mean, how happy and optimistic are you feeling now?
I've never been more optimistic about our country's future. And the last few years, instability and chaos has held back our country, but now we are returning stability to our public finances and we're making the pro-business, the pro-growth reforms. Well, I had a choice to make when I learnt of the inheritance and the £22 billion black hole in the public finances. I could have either continued with the Conservative approach of covering that up, or I could have been honest and transparent with people.
This wasn't the practiced vulnerability of a seasoned politician. This was the raw exposure of someone whose very identity had been called into question. When confronted with the label Red Tory during what should have been a routine interview, Reeves didn't just disagree with the characterisation, she broke down completely. After 25 years of Labour membership, being accused of essentially wearing a red rosette while harbouring blue policies struck at the very core of how she sees herself. The accusation didn't just question her policies, it questioned her very belonging in the party she's dedicated her adult life to. "I've been a member of the Labour Party for 25 years, she said through tears, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've been delivering leaflets since I was 16 years old." Notice what's happening here. Reeves isn't defending her policies or explaining how her economic approach aligns with Labour values.
The scale of the challenge and how the path ahead is harder and steeper than we could have envisaged on the 4th of July. I thought it was right to be open and honest, but also set out a path to bring stability back to the public finances. I know we can bring that investment back to Britain to grow our economy, to improve living standards and bring good jobs, paying decent wages right across our country.
Okay, so let's look at your growth strategy. I mean, what is your plan?
We need to boost investment, both public and private. The Treasury that I now run needs to take into account the benefits, not just the costs of investment, and we need to leverage in that private sector investment.
Instead, she's recounting her personal history with the party, as if longevity alone should shield her from criticism about ideological drift. This emotional defence reveals something profound about the current state of Labour. Reeves and the party leadership appear to believe that party loyalty is measured in years of membership rather than adherence to core principles. It's the political equivalent of saying, "I've been coming to this restaurant for 25 years," when someone suggests you are ordering from a completely different menu than what made the establishment famous. The Red Tory accusation didn't materialise from thin air. It stems from the growing perception that Reeves, as Chancellor, is pursuing economic policies that bear a striking resemblance to Conservative approaches of fiscal restraint and business-friendly measures. Her infamous statement that Labour is now the party of business did little to dispel this notion. The economic programme she's championing feels far removed from the working-class solidarity that formed Labour's foundation. What's particularly telling is who Reeves seems most upset about being challenged by.
So what are those measures going to yield? I mean, you must have done the modelling. You know, how much is reforming planning going to add to growth?
Look, the Office of Budget Responsibility will be the arbiter of the growth impact. We'll set out more detail of that in the budget and the spending review, but already we have called in planning decisions around onshore wind, housing and data centres to unlock the private investment, private sector investment
so how
in
much
sectors
growth
like...
will the National Wealth Fund deliver?
Look, you add it all up and we'll set out in the Office of Budget Responsibility the impact of these changes.
Her tears flowed when discussing newer party members questioning her Labour credentials. Yet she appears unmoved by the concerns of long-time Labour voters who feel abandoned by the party's rightward shift. The working class communities in former Red Wall constituencies who've watched their manufacturing jobs disappear, their public services deteriorate, and their standard of living stagnate. Their sense of betrayal doesn't seem to warrant the same emotional response. There's a striking contrast between Reeves's tearful defence of her party loyalty and her composed evasiveness when confronted about other controversies. When questioned about embellishments on her CV regarding her time at the Bank of England, we saw no tears, no passionate defence, just the cool deflection of a practised politician. This selective emotional transparency suggests the tears aren't just about feeling hurt, they're about which criticisms cut too close to uncomfortable truths. Political tears often function as powerful deflection mechanisms. When substantive critiques become too difficult to answer directly, emotion provides a convenient exit route. By making the moment about her feelings of belonging rather than policy substance, Reeves effectively redirected the conversation away from the uncomfortable question of whether Labour has abandoned its historical mission. What we're witnessing isn't just one politician's emotional moment, it's the visible manifestation of Labour's profound identity crisis. The party finds itself torn between its historical roots as the political voice of the working class and its current leadership's determination to occupy the centre ground with business-friendly policies. Reeves personifies this contradiction, emotionally invested in Labour's traditions while implementing an economic approach that many traditional Labour supporters find unrecognisable.
Our rules are already different from the ones we inherited from the Conservatives. So our two rules is that we will balance day-to-day spending with tax receipts, and we will bring debt down as a share of our economy.
Now, are you looking at whether you can change that to increase public investment, as many people want?
Well, our rules do treat capital investment and day-to-day spending separately. We'll balance day-to-day spending with receipts, and the problem is that made it harder to achieve growth, which is why that prize of growth has eluded us for so long. I'm not going to make those same mistakes. We will make sure that we keep that space for investment in infrastructure.
What we've witnessed with Rachel Reeves isn't just a momentary crack in political composure, it's the physical manifestation of Labour's identity crisis laid bare. The £22 billion black hole critics have identified in the UK's finances doesn't merely represent questionable economic planning, it symbolises the profound disconnect between Labour's emotional attachment to its past and the conservative-leaning policies it now champions. This contradiction sits at the heart of modern Labour, a leadership that weeps for its traditions while simultaneously dismantling them. The genuine question voters face isn't about the authenticity of Reeves's tears, but whether her economic approach honours or betrays the very values she claims to hold dear. Her policies, which critics argue align more with Conservative principles than Labour's historical commitments, suggest a party that has sacrificed its working-class foundations on the altar of electability. For the disillusioned Labour voter watching this unfold, the emotional display offers little comfort. What matters is whether the party's actions, not its sentiments, reflect the traditions that once defined it. Perhaps the tears weren't just for her questioned belonging, but for the recognition that you cannot simultaneously claim Labour's heritage while abandoning its fundamental economic principles.